If you spent any time in the world of placemaking, chances are you've been influenced directly or indirectly by the work of Carol Coletta. From her early leadership with the Mayor's Institute on City Design to leading the Memphis River Parks Partnership, Carol has consistently pushed cities to be more ambitious, more welcoming, and more connected. Now she's entering a new chapter, launching her consultancy to help visionary leaders and organizations navigate the future of placemaking and build the partnerships needed to make public spaces thrive. This week, Carol and I sit down to discuss what's guided her work across decades and sectors. We explore the power of public space as a tool for building community and democracy, and we discuss what it means to lead boldly, especially when resources are limited and stakes are high. I'm Kate Gasparo, and this is Building Better Cities. You've influenced what seems like a generation of urban thinkers and placemakers through your podcast, through your leadership with the Mayor's Institute on City Design, and then most recently with the Memphis River Parks Partnership. And I'm curious, through those different experiences, what have been sort of guiding principles for your work?
Yeah. What you didn't mention, the work I did at the Knight Foundation, at Art Place, and then with Reimagining the Civic Commons through Kresge. And I say that not to build up my resume, say that in a lot of ways, I think those were deeply informative experiences, along with the work that I had done as a practitioner in Memphis before I ever began doing anything else. I think all of that has shaped my thinking about what matters. I don't come from a professional or academic context when I think about cities. I very much think like a practitioner. When you ask me about guiding principles that I have to think about it, but there are probably three that stand out for me. One is pride. We all want to be proud of our cities. Pride is contagious, but pride needs validation. Seeing other people using the city validates my pride. It's a powerful validation, which then brings me to the second principle, which is place. When you see others using the city, that usually requires easy ways to use the city and compelling reasons to come together. The easiest way to get people to come together is to put a lot of people in close proximity to one another.
Yeah, density, yes.
Density and giving us a lot of things to do in a relatively small space gives us compelling reasons to come together. Making the small space with lots of things to do beautiful, safe, and welcoming is essential. It's fundamental. And then the third principle for me is participation. We remember only 10% of what we hear, 20% of what we see, 30% of what we see and hear, but we remember 90% of what we do. And so participation, specifically in the city, is a very powerful way to connect people to place. And the way we choose to participate in city life really shapes the future of the city. And it builds culture. As they say in business school, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so culture is so powerful. It tells us what we value. It tells us how we do things around here, often in an unspoken way. I think we get participation mostly wrong in the planning and design world, because we limit participation by asking people to come together in public meetings and sit at tables and write on sticky notes and put them on a wall and tell designers. And I wish I could take all the time and all the money that we spend on those kinds of exercises, creating a foundation for inviting participation in the actual daily life of the city, which then builds a strong culture of participation and solidarity and encouraging the things that make people proud. So for me, it's about pride, it's about place, and it's about participation.
I love that. And I'm curious because we were just talking about New Orleans and you've worked in Memphis. And, from my outsider perspective, there are some through lines. around how participation and pride in those places has occurred maybe through elements or episodes of struggle in both cities and bringing them together, whether that's through the civil rights movement in Memphis or through what's happened with Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. And I'm curious, are there places that are more apt or prone because of their histories to pride and participation?
It builds culture. It builds a sense of who we are, the resilience, right? We made it through this. I was down in New Orleans for Mardi Gras, and seeing all the ways people can participate is really extraordinary. You can stand on the street and ask, "Throw me something, mister," right? You can buy a king cake. If I'm a small business, I can make a king cake and sell them. Everybody wears the colors of Mardi Gras. People set up tables for friends with food, and they celebrate together as friends, and gives people reasons to get together throughout a year and come together to do this big thing.
Yes.
And it really does permeate the entire city. And it's not just about tourists. It's really like bread in the bone in New Orleans in a beautiful way. I mean, even making the costumes, making the floats, that to me is such a fabulous expression of culture, which holds New Orleanians together and gives them lots of pride in their place. Even though New Orleans has deep and abiding problems, in many ways, successful places have deep and abiding problems. You won't find a city that doesn't. And how do you muster the commitment to a place to keep addressing those problems? And that takes optimism. If you're not optimistic about a place, then you won't contribute to the life of that place. It will all be for you transactional and what is very individualistic. I think rising to what we have in common and what we fight together in common is really the test of a place, and its staying power, its longevity. I think that is a very delicate game, to admit your faults, to deal with them clear-eyed, but maintain enough optimism.
Yeah. And I'm curious, in your last role, we talked about pride, we talked about participation. I want to talk a little bit about place, especially the Tonley Park in Memphis, and creating a place that can resonate with the city's pride and also lend itself towards more participation. I've heard you speak in the past about the importance of third space in public spaces. I would like for you to expand on the importance of that in defining a place as it is and what it could be in the future.
It's important to get the context right when we think about place. Are we thinking only of the destination, or are we thinking of how the destination is connected to other destinations? One of the tricky parts of being, for instance, a nonprofit developer or a nonprofit conservancy or public-private partnership is that we need the destinations, but who creates the connections? And are you as ambitious about the connections as you are about the destinations? If you're not, the destinations don't leverage what all the economic impact studies tell you they're going to leverage. We're all resource constrained at some level. And you can get so focused on creating the destination that you don't pay enough attention to the context, if that makes sense. That is the limit for many nonprofit developers or conservancies, to think only about the destination. And it's just not enough.
How would you say, during the time that you were with the Memphis River Parks Partnership, that you maybe inherited that sort of philosophy and you had to transition it so that it took into account context?
Yeah, good question. And what I learned is that it's easier to do something that's mediocre than ambitious, right? Less threatening. People understand mediocrity. They're used to it. follow all the rules. Public officials don't get flummoxed to buy it. Doing something ambitious is going to cost you something, not just money, but also political chips. You can be ambitious about what is in your lane, what you are doing. The question is, can you influence the people who control the context to be equally ambitious? And these projects, again, they're wonderful in and of themselves, but they don't get the leverage that you're looking for in terms of value of all types. And that is disturbing to me. I mean, I think that doesn't mean I would trade off having done the destination. It means I would ask, how could you think bigger in the beginning? How could you leverage ambition in the connectivity and the context in the public decision making about what connects to it? That's hard.
Yeah. Yes. I'm just thinking, I spent a brief period in Memphis doing a case study on a crowdfunded bike lane on one side of Overton Park. It came about because the city in part lacked leadership on connecting its bikeways and in part lacked resources. So the community itself decided to paint their own bike lane to showcase that they wanted this, and then they would go crowdfund it from people who are interested in the civic vitality of this neighborhood. And that sort of balance or seesaw you're talking about where leadership is coming from, who can be ambitious and when, and the influence between people trying to achieve a public project or even this feeling of civic engagement in their own community. There are some cities that have very strong mayoral individuals who are guiding what vision looks like for the city. And there are cities in which the third sector, nonprofits, NGOs are driving that, and they have a lot of resources to guide community development. And then there's the third side where you have private individuals, big billionaire developers who are going out there to build large developments, and they're driving vision. And you've sat with a nonprofit developer for quite some time, sort of in the intersection of these three. And I'm curious to see what your thoughts are between the public, the private, and the nonprofit sectors. What seems to be most successful or most sustainable or best for the future of a city?
I don't think there's one answer to that. When I was the president, CEO of CEOs for Cities, a national network of urban leaders based in Chicago, when I came to CEOs for Cities, there was this very rigid view of who could be a member. And each city had to join with 3 representatives: the mayor, the head of an anchor institution, mainly a university, and a business leader, a corporate leader. And so you had to have those 3. When I came and looked at that, I thought, we need to open this up, because I firmly believe leadership can come from anywhere, from one city to the next. Making Judy Roden at Penn during her term, she completely changed University City. Walking through University City now in Philadelphia is such a gift, a vibrant place. Seeing those kinds of leaders come to the forefront in shaping a city is wonderful. Sometimes you have a very strong foundation, or, as you say, an individual like Dan Gilbert in Detroit, who has done so much to shape that city's downtown. And so there's no formula, there's no one thing that works right. I think you have to say, where can leadership come from in our city? To the extent you're open to different answers, you're open to leadership coming from any place, I think you're in the safest, most resilient position, because you don't want to overlook leadership that may be hoping to break out. And the tragedy is not to have too much leadership, is to have too little.
I think that's fair, especially given your point on context and how each city has sort of developed and struggled and thrived in different ways that have lent itself to different leadership styles for the vision of the city to come to fruition.
I mean, right? You're blessed with a strong mayor. The Highline, I'll just pick a project because I've been working with the Highline Network recently. Rudy Giuliani was, we're going to tear that railroad trestle down. It is of no value. And the community was saying, we've got ideas. We're excited about the potential. Then Bloomberg gets elected and he's like, great asset. Let's do this. So, it may just be the moment.
You just talked about the Highline Network. That is another sort of conservancy or nonprofit developer. I'm curious, for those who are not familiar with the role of a nonprofit developer, can you expand on how they work between societal and urban development challenges in a way that for-profit developers are not necessarily situated to?
Well, the only time I have been a non-governmental nonprofit developer is with the partnership. The only thing I've ever developed as a nonprofit developer is public space. There are nonprofit developers, as you know, for housing, sometimes transportation links. We can think of universities. They all are, I think, somewhat different. In our case, we had a responsibility, an obligation to work for the public. We had to be responsible stewards to make sure that very loud, organized voices of opposition to certain uses in the park were not given sway over the design, really needed to reflect the larger public purpose of the place, but that it also made sense from a development standpoint. This organization that I ran manages 6 miles of riverfront in Memphis. There are a lot of places we could have begun our work. We actually did 2 one-square block parks with former Confederate associations first. We did a 5-mile bike ped trail. But when we decided to do a big destination park, we chose a place that for many Memphians was a surprise. It was unexpected. They would have chosen another place. And yet, if you looked at what the upside for the public at large was, it was much better to develop in this location versus the other preferred location of, again, a number of loud people. There are designs that organized opposition wanted that would have worked great for them for 7 days a year, but not great for the public the rest of the days of the year. So I think there is a strong responsibility to balance public interest and also make sure that we're building something that can be maintained over time and sustained. I mean, you want it to look as good 100 years from now as it does the day you opened it. That is the biggest, I think, challenge for most nonprofit conservancy of public space. Is how do you ensure that what you build can be maintained in cities that also give short shrift to maintenance, period, and maintenance of public space in particular.
Yes, that is such a great yardstick of success, is not just the delivery of an asset, but how it is maintained and used and operated over, as you said, 100-year period. In your position leading the partnership, what were other yardsticks that you kept on hand to measure your success as you were going through a process where there was vocal opposition in some cases, that there was other desires from maybe funders?
Obviously, we had an economic impact study. You do it and check that box so you can make your case. But we look at place and look how many people are visiting and where they're from. I'm very into the metrics of use. We also intercept people with intercept interviews asking their views on clean, safe, welcoming. We know the demographics. We ask a question that I think is really important. I think has hidden value. Did you meet someone new while you were in the park? And we have kind of remarkable results on that. And I think part of it, the park's design and the allure of the park, but also the fact that we have it. And our rangers do a lot more than just pick up garbage and try to keep the peace. We have equipment loans, which is very easy to do and creates an interaction with the staff. A lot of things we do, we even use the High Neighbor on our uniforms. It's all about welcoming and you belong here. Public space, if it attracts people across income, has a very unusual and powerful role to play in creating opportunity for people, particularly opportunity, I would say opportunity, community, and democracy. We often say, well, how many people were in the space and what is the economic impact? And all of that is important, but it's not nearly as important, in my opinion, as the ability to create community and opportunity and this feeling of we are all in this together, which goes back to participation.
Yes.
So that to me is what's exciting about public space. And for me, it's really the next. I mean, we've seen many public spaces designed beautifully, right? There's so many great public spaces over the last 15 years that have been built. They're all exciting, and I have to see all of them, when I go to cities. I mean, it's one of the reasons I go. We got all kinds of benchmarks around what does it cost to maintain an acre of this, that, and the other, and what should operations look like. I think what we don't know much about is how do you get people, especially across incomes, to feel a sense of solidarity, comfort, and then, in relationship, even though it may be the loosest of relationships, but in the space. That to me is the big promise of public space that we know very little about today.
I think I've heard you give a talk on the strength of connection and how we're sort of in this crisis of community right now as people are getting more siloed through social media and how we interact on a day-to-day basis. And I can't help but think when you talk about meeting somebody new in a public space and lending itself to culture and participation in a city, does it matter that these are weak or strong ties that people are forming in public spaces? Are we just hoping for any sort of neighborly action to take place? Or are we asking our public spaces to contribute to a civic community that can be built?
Well, loose tie networks, we know they are more generative than strong tie networks, right? Because strong tie networks are friends for life. They're sometimes people we work with for a long time. They're family. They're close neighbors. The people we went to school with is we tend more and more in America to go to school with people who are in the same demographic, right? Particularly income-wise. Same thing with housing. We live in neighborhoods that are most likely everybody's the same income generally. So where do you even create the generative loose tie networks so that someone, let's say in a disadvantaged neighborhood, is going to have any opportunity to break loose of the zip code as destiny and create new opportunity unless there's a loose tie somewhere. Someone gives them access to someone else. And so can you start with that? Like, okay, come to the public space and we're all going to create loose tie networks. No. I think that's why we have to think intentionally about what is the thin layer that we can add to anything to get people to acknowledge one another. But one thing that research is really clear about is that if I, as a stranger, initiate a greeting to another stranger, I am at first reluctant to do it. The stranger may think, okay, what are you up to? But research shows that I feel better as a result, even if I was reluctant or fearful that somebody wouldn't speak back or they would think I was strange. After I do it, I feel better and the stranger feels better. But interestingly, I feel better than the stranger who was greeted. They feel better, but I get even more joy out of it. It's like any communal moment, any greeting moment, the Episcopalian Church, turn to your left, turn to your right,
Right.
places of worship will do that. So how do we, and first of all, keep in mind, most public spaces have no management whatsoever,
That's
right? I
right.
mean, visible in the space, which I think is a huge problem. We all want to be safe, but one of the best ways to make people safe is to put someone who is in charge, like manager. I'm the lifeguard, right? I'm the
Mhm.
lifeguard of the space. I'm going to be nice to everybody, but if there's an emergency, I know what to do.
Mm.
And I answer questions, warn people, hey, follow the rules, don't run. So there's a public management function or the management of public space on the scene
Mhm.
that is, I think it's a whole class of employees that we need.
Yeah. I like your metaphor of the lifeguard and the culture of the high neighbor of those operating Tomley Park. It's sort of that model that we need. I think during COVID, we got out of practice of saying hello on the street. Wearing a mask isn't conducive to that. So we are looking for examples of a little courage to initiate a loose tie. How did you think about this when you came into leadership at the partnership? Was it part of the model that you always knew there was going to be operators of public space? And how are you funding something like this over time?
The tragedy is that we can't fund it in all of our parks. And that to me is so sad. We had been thinking about it as part of the Reimagining the Civic Commons initiative
Mm.
that I helped instigate when I was at Knight Foundation and then carried on as senior fellow at the Kresge Foundation. And so I felt very strongly about that to begin with. But part of what you can do is, for instance, I thought this was very clever. We had in one of those one square block parks that I talked about earlier, one of the ones we reopened, we put a food vendor there. We paid part of the salary. It was a private organization, but we subsidized the salaries of the people who worked there. So we would say, when you get a slow moment, go out and sweep the walk, straighten the chairs, answer questions. That worked for a very long time. When we introduced kayak rentals, they would carry the kayaks down to the water, and it was really great. But it was a very special operator. And when we lost that operator because he went on to do other things in his career, it was a real blow. And so you need to define a sort of a new, it's like the ranger that we wanted was a different job than just someone to keep the park clean.
Yeah.
And when we don't hire security guards because we don't want someone who sees their only job as being security.
Mm.
We want a host. Another metaphor is
Yeah. Host.
of this party. And it's my job to think about what a host does. A host is making sure people are having a good time. The host makes sure that people feel greeted, right? Your host wants to greet you when you come in. They want you to meet somebody new, right? A good party, people are meeting other people. Politically, that would probably sound crazy to most people. Oh, we're going to have a host. Let's put that on the city website. We're hiring for a host. But in effect, that is what the job is. A host also, the dishes stack up and you just go, let me grab those dishes for you and put them in the kitchen. Clear a place for your drink. That's the way we need people to think about public space. You've got to have the people to do it. You've got to have those positions. So it was intentional from the very beginning. And we kept thinking of ways. I mean, we tried a million things. And I'll tell you one other way, which was interesting. We had a DJ who worked with us on Sunset Kayak events. He would go out in the water and play music because of his own background. He would say, now, your 30 minutes is running and you need to take the kayak back because we've got a line of people. And then he would give away prizes. Everybody, come over here, first one to get to me. And so people would try to get over to the boat. And then we hired him for Sunset Skate. And what happened is we realized he was really good at delivering cultural messages, like behavior. Here's the way we do things around here. And he would be recognizing what people needed a little encouragement to understand. This is a special place and you need to follow the rules. We need 50 places, 100 places trying to do the same thing and learning at an accelerated pace because we need to unlock the potential of this move that doesn't require a lot of money, doesn't require big policy changes. It's not like you got to get an act of Congress to do it.
I think this moment is specifically set up to lend itself to those individuals who can be hosts or stewards of places and models for us and how we connect in public spaces. And I'm curious, as you transition into this next phase of your career, how are you thinking about taking that specific idea and translating it to other developments, other cities, other communities? That's a long way to say, like, who is asking for your help right now? And what issues do you feel like you would like to help the most?
Yeah. How do you add thin layers in public space to create loose tie connections that lead to opportunity and, again, community and democracy? That is a real passion of mine. A lot of times I get called into a city to say, how do we begin? How do we really get started? How do you create governance that's reasonable for a public-private partnership and can get stuff done? How do you case make for these projects? How do we get the parties to the table? Those are common questions. And the great thing is when you're a consultant, you can really be very truthful with people. Particularly at this stage of my career, I don't have a lot of time to shade my truth, right? I've got a network. Lots of people over the years we funded, trained, and encouraged to do cool things in cities. They're everywhere and doing wonderful things. But what I really would love to do is have discipline around a group of people who are intentionally participating, sharing ideas and results, measuring the result of the work in the same way, which would give us the rigor and the tool of persuasion that one would need to make this go viral. That's the thing I am most interested in doing.
Thanks for tuning in to Building Better Cities. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss another episode. And if you could help spread the word by sharing with someone, it would mean so much to us. To learn more about our work, check out buildingbettercities.com. We're excited to keep the conversation going. So until next time, let's keep building better cities together.